work in international development has focused on addressing the social determinants of health and HIV, child protection, sexual violence, urban health, and strengthening linkages between community and facility-based services. For the past decade, Marcy has worked as a senior HIV advisor with John Snow, based out of the organization's Indonesia and Boston offices. She was the Orphans and Vulnerable Children team lead for JSI's AIDS-Star1 project and has designed, led, and provided extensive technical support for HIV and integrated health and social welfare programs throughout sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. Before coming to JSI, Marcy worked in Zimbabwe, Cambodia, and the Dominican Republic on programs addressing youth health and vulnerability. Welcome, Marcy.
Okay, so let me see.
Try it, see if this works.
This is going to work. Thank you, Amelia. So I want to spend the next few minutes, and I'll try to keep it short, scrolling through the guide a bit to show everybody a bit of the content and also something we're really excited about, which is the interactivity and the resources available. We'll try not to make you dizzy. But before I do that, I just want to say this resource was developed with the input of so many people. As many of you know, there's very little literature available or resources available, especially on how to facilitate from the clinical and medical forensic exam to the community social service resources. And so the way we populated this resource and got all this information was through extensive key informant interviews and extraordinary technical advisory groups, some of whom are in the room today, building out resources such as IRC's child abuse guidelines and Rebecca Davis's work on case management and referrals. So this resource really came from everybody here and people working directly with children and adolescents. And so thank you, and thank you to them. Okay.
So this is the one with the cover.
Cover, okay. We tried very hard to make it so we wouldn't make you dizzy. So the resource has 9 sections, and they're listed here. It includes an introduction that really goes over different models of an integrated approach, and that's the section that really tries to draw on the literature in terms of what has worked, what hasn't worked, what's been evaluated, is there any information on what models work best in terms of outcomes in a number of different domains. The minimum package, which I'll show you in a minute, really is the foundation and the conceptual framework around a lot of this work, showing the range of services children and adolescents need and deserve. There's a chapter on the many stakeholders, multi-sectoral nature of the response, and what their roles and responsibilities both should and could be. A section on mandatory reporting, and thank you, I think it was Gretchen who pointed out that needed to be really beefed up in the original draft, highlights some of the really critical issues around mandatory reporting, but also highlights some of the tensions between mandatory reporting and what's actually in the best interest of the child, and how sometimes those are not necessarily in line with each other, and tries to raise questions to give providers, managers, implementers food for thought about how to handle that. Section 6 really covers how to set up a referral pathway, provides pretty extensive detailed guidance. I'll go into that later. A section on case management with Becky, I think, is going to talk about case management, so I'll keep going. Guiding principles, which is an overview of some of the global key principles when you're working with children and adolescents, and then program highlights and resources. So this, okay, not so bad to me. Let's see. There. So this is the minimum framework of needs, and this is really, again, the conceptual framework behind this whole document. And what we tried to do here was just put in one place. I think people generally tend to know different services, but there didn't seem to be a resource for all the services that a child and adolescent needs and deserves in both the immediate response period after violence and over the long term. And so this covers, we did not cover medical and forensic care and treatment because those were covered in the 2012 guidelines that were mentioned previously. So it really looks at the domains of safety and protection, psychosocial support, legal justice, and other social services. And so this chapter contains pretty detailed information about each of these bullet point services that are required in the immediate and long term. And again, you all know this, but obviously not for everybody, but could be required by a child or adolescent and their families. And then it goes into, each section covers some of these key domains and information, and really just tries to raise, a resource like this is not going to have the answers. It's really trying to raise a lot of the questions, maybe, and put forward some of the things that are required, and really just make sure they have the resources of where to get more information. So resources are a big part of this document. You might want to close your eyes for like 1 second when I scroll down here. So for example, throughout the whole document, there's just a tremendous amount of resources with URLs so the reader can find where to go for more information. And we include contact information in a lot of sections as well. Another really critical section here is this section 4 on roles and responsibilities. We all know there's so many stakeholders involved in this response. And so we wanted to really highlight who some of these stakeholders are. Police, teachers, mental health professionals, survivors advocates, legal sector actors, traditional courts, and talks a bit about what role they generally play, but what role they also could play, and the connections between them. And so here, you're able to go between the different sections, take you to this section, for example, on community and traditional leadership, where it talks about some of the roles they can play, and also talks about some, not assuming that they necessarily will play a positive role, that you might need to work with them very closely to make sure they're coming at this issue from a human rights perspective. But we really wanted to find a way to keep going back to the link between formal and the informal system, and how they both, they're not really separate components, they need to be part of the same system. And one of the, I think, hopefully, I would imagine for people, one of the most useful chapters includes job aids on how to set up a referral pathway. And so this section includes a pretty detailed checklist of all the different steps, pretty basic, that whether you're a health provider or you're an NGO or you're a women's group, how you can help take one step forward towards a referral, making a stronger referral network. And so we sort of started with this figure, which we chose sort of the pathway by which a child or an adolescent may enter the system. And of course we know this is not, it's never, very unlikely that it's this linear. But this idea was to, again, show the range of resources and support that hopefully one day a child or adolescent can receive. And then I'll just show you one last section. At least for me, one of the most exciting parts of developing this resource was hearing so many stories from different organizations. And so we wanted to include a longer narrative on some of those highlights. And so we have 7 program highlights of case studies from different programs from South Africa, the Philippines, Zambia, Nigeria, and Swaziland. And here, it's just an opportunity to talk for each of these programs to share a little bit more about their experiences, and it's also turned into, somewhat unexpectedly, a resource for more job aids and tools. So for example, this is a client flow chart that illustrates one program in Zambia and how when clients come to the system, they flow through. And one of the other, I think, resources for programs in this section is it talks in more detail about specific programs. So for example, a court preparation program that one program in, I believe, the Philippines is doing in order to make sure that their clients are prepared for the court process. Another case study goes into a lot of detail about a program for young sex offenders, noting the high number of young people who are sex offenders themselves, and a program to help rehabilitate them, along with post-rape services for those who have been sexually exploited. So I think I'm probably over time already, and the link to this resource is on the back of your agenda, so you can go there, it's live, and play with the interactivity and sort of see the breadth of resources in there, and happy to talk more about it during Q&A.
Thank you very much.